Victoria's world came crashing down the moment she found out the truth. The truth that Holden, the man she had trusted and defended with every ounce of her heart, had cheated on Claire. It wasn't just a rumor whispered in the shadows of Newman Enterprises or a passing gossip from one of the Genoa City social circles. It was real, undeniable, and brutally painful. She had seen the evidence with her own eyes, a cruel collection of moments that shattered every illusion she had built around their relationship. For Victoria, betrayal had always been the one sin she couldn't tolerate, the one act that stripped away every excuse and left only devastation in its wake. And now, facing Holden, her voice trembling with fury and heartbreak, she uttered 6 words that would haunt both of them forever. 6 words that cut deeper than any slap or scream ever could. Holden stood there, guilt etched into every line of his face, knowing there was no way to undo the damage he had caused. Victoria's eyes burned into him, not with rage alone, but with something far worse, disappointment. He had seen that look before, years ago, when Victoria had discovered another man's betrayal, and he had promised her that he would never be one of those men. Yet here they were, and all the promises in the world meant nothing. The room felt suffocatingly silent, save for the ragged sound of her breathing. He tried to explain, to find the right words that might somehow make sense of the chaos, but Victoria didn't want explanations. Her voice was low, cold, and sharp as she looked at him and said, "You destroyed what I believed in." Those were the 6 words that ended everything. They hung between them like a verdict, a sentence with no appeal. Holden flinched, his throat tightening as if those words had physically struck him. "Victoria, please," he tried to say, his voice cracking under the weight of his own regret. "It wasn't what you think." But she cut him off, not with shouting or anger but with silence. Her silence was louder than any confrontation, echoing through the walls of the Newman mansion like the ghost of everything they used to be. She turned her back on him, running a hand through her hair as tears she refused to show him welled up in her eyes. She had loved Holden deeply, perhaps too deeply. After everything she'd gone through with heartbreak and betrayal in her past, she had thought she could finally trust someone new. But Holden's actions had reopened every old wound, and now she was bleeding from all of them again. Holden reached for her, but she recoiled, stepping away as if his touch burned her. "Don't," she whispered hoarsely. "Don't you dare touch me." The venom in her tone was laced with hurt rather than hate, but that made it even more devastating. He wanted to apologize, to fall on his knees and beg for forgiveness, but even he knew that words couldn't fix this. The truth was that Holden hadn't just cheated on Claire. He had betrayed every ounce of trust Victoria had placed in him. Claire had been the innocent one in all this, caught in the crossfire of a messy, complicated situation she didn't deserve. And now Victoria felt a pang of guilt for her daughter as well, knowing this revelation would destroy her too. Victoria's mind raced, replaying every moment of the past few months. The nights Holden said he was working late, the times he seemed distant and distracted, the way he avoided certain questions, it all made sense now. Every red flag she had ignored in the name of love came back to mock her. She had convinced herself that Holden was different, that his loyalty to her and Claire was genuine. How foolish she felt now. The thought that he had been lying while smiling at her, while holding her hand, while talking about their future, it was enough to make her stomach turn. She wanted to scream, to throw something, but she refused to give him that satisfaction. Instead, she stood tall, eyes brimming with tears that refused to fall, and told him coldly, "You've made your choice. Now live with it." Holden's eyes filled with remorse, but there was no defense left for him to give. He tried to explain that it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, that he hadn't meant for it to happen, all the usual words men like him said when they got caught. But Victoria had heard them all before. "A mistake," she repeated bitterly, her voice shaking. "You don't just mistake your way into someone else's bed, Holden. You knew exactly what you were doing." Her pain was turning into anger now, a familiar armor she used to protect herself from the heartbreak threatening to consume her. "You had a family. You had me. And you threw it all away for what? A few nights of excitement? Was that worth destroying everything we built?" Holden lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. Every word she said was true, and he knew it. He had been stupid, reckless, and selfish. He had told himself that what happened didn't mean anything, that it was a mistake he could bury and move past. But secrets never stay hidden for long in Genoa City. When Claire found out, it was only a matter of time before Victoria did too. The guilt had been eating away at him long before the truth came out, but he hadn't had the courage to confess. Now, standing before the woman he loved and watching her break because of him, he realized he had destroyed something irreplaceable. Victoria finally turned to face him again, her expression a mixture of pain and disbelief. "You didn't just cheat on Claire, Holden," she said quietly. "You cheated on me too, on the family we were trying to build, on the trust one gave you." Her voice cracked, and for a moment she looked like she might crumble. But then she straightened her shoulders, gathering every ounce of strength she had left. "I hope she was worth it." Those words, laced with venom and sorrow, hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Holden's heart sank. He tried to reach out again, but Victoria stepped back. "Don't," she repeated. "It's over." The silence that followed was suffocating. Victoria walked to the window, staring out at the dark Genoa city skyline. The lights below flickered faintly, a world still turning while hers felt like it had stopped. She thought of all the times she had defended Holden, to her family, to friends, even to Claire when she had her doubts. She had believed in him more than she believed in herself sometimes. And now all of that faith felt wasted. "You destroyed what I believed in," she whispered again, almost to herself this time. It was as if saying it out loud helped her finally accept it. Holden swallowed hard, his own tears threatening to fall. "Victoria, please, I'll do anything. I'll make this right." But Victoria turned back to him, eyes steeled now with resolve. "You can't make it right," she said. "You can't undo betrayal. You can't unbreak trust. And you can't unshatter my heart." Her words hit him like another blow, and this time, he knew there was nothing left to say. She had closed herself off completely, the way she always did when someone wounded her this deeply. There would be no forgiveness this time, no second chance. As she walked toward the door, Holden moved to block her path, desperate to say something, anything that might stop her from leaving. "Please just hear me out," he begged. But Victoria's eyes were cold. "I've heard enough," she said. "You said everything you needed to when you chose to betray me." Then, with one final look of heartbreak and fury, she walked out, leaving Holden alone with his guilt. Outside, in the cool night air, Victoria finally let the tears fall. The pain was unbearable, not just because of what Holden had done, but because she had allowed herself to love again, to hope again. She thought she was past this, past being the woman who trusted too easily and got hurt too deeply. But love had a cruel way of finding her weaknesses. As she stood there shaking, she realized that this wasn't just about Holden. It was about every betrayal she had ever endured. Billy J.T. Ashland, and now Holden. Every man she had given her heart to had somehow found a way to break it. Meanwhile, back inside, Holden sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. He could still hear her words echoing in his mind. "You destroyed what I believed in." They were simple words, but they carried the weight of everything he had lost. Her trust, her love, her faith in him. He thought of Claire, of how this revelation would affect her too. She had always seen him as someone stable, dependable, someone she could count on. Now he had failed her as well. The ripple effect of his mistake was spreading, and there was no stopping it. Victoria drove aimlessly through the empty streets of Genoa City, trying to calm the storm inside her. Every red light, every familiar landmark reminded her of Holden, of the life they were supposed to have. She pulled over near Chancellor Park, the place where he had once promised her forever. The irony wasn't lost on her. She sat there for a long time, staring at the empty benches and listening to the distant hum of the city. Her heart hurt, but beneath the pain was a simmering determination. She had survived worse before, and she would survive this too. By the next morning, word had started to spread. Genoa City had a way of making secrets public faster than anyone could imagine. When Claire found out, she was shattered. She couldn't believe that Holden, the man she had admired and trusted, had betrayed her and her mother in one reckless act. The confrontation between Claire and Holden was explosive, full of tears, anger, and disbelief. She screamed at him for ruining everything, for hurting Victoria, the one person who had always stood by him. Holden's guilt deepened, realizing he hadn't just lost Victoria, but he had broken the fragile bond he had with her daughter too. For Victoria, the days that followed were a blur. She threw herself into work, using Newman Enterprises as her armor. Everyone around her could see the pain in her eyes, even when she tried to hide it. Nikki tried to comfort her, reminding her that she was strong, that she didn't need anyone who would hurt her like this. But Victoria wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for closure. She wanted to understand how the man she thought she knew could betray her so easily. But deep down, she knew she'd never get that answer. Some betrayals didn't make sense. Some just happened because people were weak. Eventually, Holden tried to reach out again, sending flowers, messages, and apologies that went unanswered. Victoria didn't even open them. She had learned the hard way that forgiving too soon only led to more pain. Instead, she focused on her family, her children, and rebuilding her sense of self. But even as she tried to move on, those 6 painful words lingered. A reminder of what she had lost and what she would never allow herself to lose again. You destroyed what I believed in. They were more than just words. They were a line in the sand. And once Victoria drew that line, there was no going back. In time, Holden realized that he hadn't just lost a relationship. He had lost the best part of himself. Victoria had believed in him when no one else did. She had seen potential in him, given him purpose, and loved him without reservation. And he had thrown it all away. The regret was suffocating, but it was also deserved. Victoria, meanwhile, found a strange sense of peace in the aftermath. Painful as it was, she knew she'd come out stronger. She always did. Genoa City had seen her fall before, but it had also seen her rise. And somewhere deep down, as she stood alone in her office late one night, she whispered those 6 words again, not with anger this time but with acceptance. You destroyed what I believed in. They no longer sounded like heartbreak. They sounded like closure. Because for the first time in a long time, Victoria Newman was done being broken. She was ready to be whole again, even if it meant leaving love behind. And as the lights of Genoa City glowed in the distance, she knew that no matter how painful it was, she would never let betrayal define her again. The silence in the room was not merely an absence of sound but a physical presence. A heavy, suffocating blanket that had descended the moment Victoria Newman's eyes had finished scanning the text on her phone. Holden, who had been nervously pacing just moments before, now stood frozen, a statue of guilt in the middle of her impeccably decorated office, a space that had witnessed countless corporate battles but none as intimately devastating as the one about to unfold. He watched the color drain from her face, a slow, chilling fade from vibrant life to a ghostly pallor, and he knew, with a sinking certainty that felt like a physical blow to his gut, that the carefully constructed dam of his lies was about to shatter. Every reassuring word he had uttered, every deflection, every pained expression meant to convey the image of a wronged man, evaporated into the charged air, rendered meaningless by the truth that now hung between them, unspoken but deafening. Victoria's hand, which had been holding the phone with such casual authority, lowered slowly to her side, her knuckles white against the dark casing, and when her eyes finally lifted to meet his, they were not filled with the fire of anger he had braced for, but with a profound, bottomless ocean of betrayal. It was a look that saw straight through the facade, past the charming smile and the carefully curated apologies, right down to the rotten core of his infidelity, and in that prolonged silent stare, Holden felt more exposed and judged than he ever had in his life. She took a single deliberate step forward, the click of her heel on the polished floor echoing like a gunshot in the tense quiet. Her voice, when it finally came, was not the shrill scream he might have expected, nor was it the tearful quiver of a heartbroken woman. It was low, measured, and carried the chilling weight of absolute final comprehension. Each word was chosen not in haste, but with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, designed to inflict the maximum truth, not just the maximum pain. I know what you did, Holden, she began, the syllables dropping like stones into the stillness, and he could do nothing but stand there, paralyzed, his own excuses dying in his throat. She continued, her gaze never wavering, pinning him in place. I know you cheated on Claire. The name of the woman he had vowed to love, to cherish, to protect, hung in the air, a stark reminder of the life he had so carelessly shattered. The admission from her lips made the act feel more real, more sordid, than it ever had in the shadowy recesses of his own conscience. It was no longer a secret he carried. It was a fact acknowledged and condemned by the one person whose opinion, in that moment, felt like the judgment of the entire world. And then came the 6 words. They were not shouted, not spat with venom, but delivered with a quiet, devastating finality that carved a chasm between them, a divide Holden knew he could never cross again. "And I am done with you forever." The sentence was simple, grammatically unremarkable, but its meaning was tectonic. It was not a threat, not an ultimatum to be negotiated. It was a statement of fact, a decree issued from a throne of utter disappointment and revoked trust. "I am done" spoke of a conclusion reached after exhaustive mental and emotional accounting, the final entry in the ledger of their relationship. "With you" isolated him, defining him not as the man she loved, but as the source of her pain, the problem from which she was now removing herself. And "forever," that word extinguished any flickering hope, any fantasy of a heartfelt apology followed by a slow, difficult reconciliation. It was a word that stretched into an infinite, cold future, a lifetime of absence and silence. In the space of those 6 painful words, Victoria had not only ended their relationship, she had erased its very possibility from the timeline of her life, rendering him a ghost in her past, a mistake to be learned from, but never revisited. The impact on Holden was immediate and visceral. It was as if the floor beneath him had given way, plunging him into a freezing abyss of consequence. All the air left his lungs in a sharp, involuntary gasp, and the confident, almost arrogant posture he had maintained throughout his deception crumbled, his shoulders slumping under the immense weight of his loss. He wanted to speak, to beg, to somehow find the magical combination of words that could unsay what she had just said, that could rewind the clock just 60 seconds to the fragile, hopeful uncertainty that had existed before her pronouncement. But his tongue felt thick and useless in his mouth. What could he possibly say? "I'm sorry" was a pathetic, insignificant pebble thrown into the Grand Canyon of his betrayal. It didn't mean anything would be the ultimate insult, a confirmation of his profound disrespect not just for Claire, but for Victoria's intelligence and for the sanctity of the vows he had treated as disposable. "I love you" would have been the greatest lie of all, a hollow echo in the cavernous space her love had once filled. So he stood there, mute and defeated, watching as the woman he had taken for granted, the woman whose fierce loyalty he had assumed was an unshakable constant, turned her back on him, her posture rigid with a resolve that was both terrifying and magnificent. For Victoria, the act of speaking those words was both an agony and a liberation. Each one had felt like tearing a piece of her own heart out, a painful amputation of a future she had, despite everything, still vaguely imagined. There was a part of her, the part that remembered lazy Sunday mornings and shared laughter, that screamed in protest at their finality. But a louder, stronger part, the part that was her father's daughter, the part that was all Newman, recognized the absolute necessity of the act. This was not just about the cheating, as devastating as that was. It was about the lies, the calculated deception, the utter erosion of the trust that formed the bedrock of any real connection. To forgive him now would be to betray herself, to declare that her own self-respect was negotiable, that her boundaries were permeable enough to accommodate such a fundamental violation. As the words left her lips, a strange, cold calm settled over her, replacing the white-hot fury and the gut-wrenching sorrow. It was the calm of a decision made, a path chosen. The pain was still there, a raw, gaping wound, but it was now a clean pain, one that would heal, rather than the festering, infected pain of staying in a situation built on a lie. She had drawn a line in the sand, and in doing so she had reclaimed her own agency, her own narrative from the wreckage he had created. The aftermath of those 6 words stretched on, a landscape of ruin within the plush confines of the office. Holden remained rooted to the spot, a monument to his own folly, watching as Victoria methodically began the process of erasing him from her immediate world. She didn't look at him again. Her focus was now entirely inward, on the practical steps of survival. She picked up her purse from the desk, her movements efficient and devoid of any superfluous emotion. She straightened a frame on the wall, a small subconscious act of imposing order on the chaos he had unleashed. Every action was a silent reiteration of her statement. "I am moving on, and you are no longer a part of this motion." The finality of it was crushing. There were no more questions, no demands for explanations, no theatrical gestures. The trial was over, the verdict had been rendered, and the sentence was immediate and lifelong banishment. He was now an outsider looking in at a life he had been foolish enough to throw away, and the view from the other side of Victoria's resolve was the most desolate sight he had ever beheld. The silence was no longer just heavy. It was absolute, filled only with the echo of the 6 painful words that had just dismantled his world, a world he now realized he had never truly deserved to be a part of in the first place. The love was gone, but the lesson remained, a searing brand on his soul, and he knew with a certainty that would haunt him for the rest of his days, that he would never find his way back from this.